Hi guys, and welcome to another digital painting tutorial in Procreate where we are going to paint avocado toast. This is Creatively Me with Bree. You guessed it, I'm Bree, and hopefully by the end of this video you will have something that looks like this. To begin, I make the background gray just because I feel like white's really rough on the eyes. Next, I'm going in with a brown that's sort of on the yellowish side, and I'm going to grab the Hearts brush, which you can find under Artistic in the Procreate app, and then I create a jelly bean type shape. Personally, I had to duplicate my layers because I didn't have the opacity on that brush all the way up, so I wanted to make sure that this color was solid. Next, I go into the adjustments tool all the way down to liquefy, and you can see that I'm pushing the bread crust around using the liquefy tool, and that's so that the bread looks more natural. Once I have the shape the way that I want it, I will go in and I will create a new layer and then put on a clipping mask so that I can draw directly on top of the bread crust using some textured brushes. I use a charcoal brush, and I really just want to get some colors down for variation, since bread crust is obviously not going to be a continuous layer throughout. There will be dips and valleys, and then obviously when lighting hits from different angles, not everything will be highlighted. So I'm just adding in general colors to make the bread not seem flat and one-dimensional. I do go in with the smudge tool here and I just lighten up some of the harsher edges. Once I'm satisfied with the overall look, I combine the layers together and then I create a new layer and put it underneath the bread crust. Now I'm going in with a cream color and I'm just coloring in the bread underneath the bread crust and just filling it in. Once this part is complete, I add a layer on top of the bread and create a clipping mask. I select a slightly lighter cream color and go to the charcoal brush and burnt tree just to create a nice texture on top. So that way we're starting to create the depth and texture of bread itself. Now on another new layer, I also create another clipping mask and I choose a darker brown. And I go to the spray paints and I select Flicks and I make it rather large and spread it around. And then I do multiply and then I go in and I just adjust the color until it's much lighter and sort of looks like the shadow that we would see of like the craters within bread that's very airy. I then go into the select tool right here and I choose warp and I make them more oblong because I think oblong is more organic looking for bread. On another new layer and a clipping mask, I go in with the burnt tree brush and create some textured edges, which will smooth out in a moment and also change the color a bit. I just wanted it to look like the bread was toasted. And so I put it on multiply. I go into the adjustments and I start adjusting the color just for it to be a little bit brighter. And then I go in with the smudge tool using the burnt brush and softening up the edges. We're getting close to being done with the toasted bread. We are just going to put on some cream cheese and then we'll be on to painting the avocado. Once I like the way it looks, I combine all the layers, duplicate it just in case I mess it up. I think that's always a good idea. And then I go in with the smudge tool using Leatherwood, which you can find under Artistic. And I'm just going around the edges of the crust because I don't want the crust to be too much of a distraction and too harsh of a line. So I'm just softening up some areas just so that it doesn't distract away from what will be the focal point, which will be the avocado. Next, I'm going to choose a very light cream color and put on a new layer and a clipping mask. And we're going to go in with the painting brush. The one that I'm using is a slight variation of the flat brush. I just added texture to it. And then I paint along the edge so it looks like the dips and divots that we would see on something like sourdough bread, for example. And then once I sort of have it the way that I want, I go ahead, add a new layer, use a clipping mask, and then go to white. And then I'm actually going to go down to the spray paint and I'm going to choose the brush splatter. And then I'm going to make sure that it's relatively large and then just paint on that clipping mask in the space where I would like the cream cheese to appear. I do resize it just slightly, make sure that it rests on the bread where I want it, and then I put all of these layers, after I add a new layer, into a group so that I can hide them, so that I can now focus on painting the avocado. First, I get my green and start working on getting the shape that I want. Once I have that established, I add a new layer. And on this new layer, which you will see in just a moment, I just use a slightly lighter green for where the pit of the avocado would typically be. And I just get the shape that I want, combine them. And now I have a very basic avocado established. Now I'm going to add a little bit of coloring to it. I do put the avocado on alpha lock to ensure that when I color, it stays directly on the avocado and doesn't go anywhere else. I use a charcoal brush to make sure that as I'm smudging out the color, it doesn't lose all of its texture. I don't want it too smooth because so much of the piece already has texture and it's a very textured style. Obviously, avocado is a very smooth texture compared to the bread, especially when it's toasted. So it's okay that it has a slightly smoother appearance, but I just didn't want it to be such an awkward contrast. So I wanted to make sure that I kept some of the texture in there. And so that we don't overwork ourselves, I'm really only painting one avocado with basic color and highlight. And I'm going to just duplicate it in a moment to create the spread of avocado along the top of the toast. Once I have everything established where I want it, that's where we can go in and paint each avocado a little bit different so that they don't feel too copy and pasted. We want them to feel independent of one another, but there's no need to do all that extra work when we can simply just duplicate and adjust the colors once I have their placement established. This is essentially like art Tetris right now, finding the exact way we want it to rest. And also be mindful of where they are resting, right? So typically when we set the avocados down, they go in a specific way where they're laying on top of each other. So be mindful of that because we need to know how they're resting against one another for creating shadows. If you've made it this far into the video, can you comment down below, avocado toast is life, just so I know that you're still here with me? All right, and back to the project. So as you can see, I'm just making some adjustments to how they're laying, and it's because I don't want them to look too uniform. Right now they do look uniform. I combine them all into one layer, and then I'm going to go in and I'm just adjusting the shapes if there's anything I don't like about it. Again, they will look different soon as we start to paint in detail. Right now I'm adding shadow in between them. I will be smudging that out so that it's not so harsh in just a moment. But I want it to be established, how they're overlapping. I'm just using the charcoal brush again and smudging the colors together and just working it slowly. If I was really patient, I would have taken the opacity down on the brush and really taken my time to work in the colors. But I was in a rush to get this done. And I felt like it was too dark, so I just smudged it around some more just to make sure that it doesn't look too harsh. We want it to be shadowed, but not overwhelming. So I'm going to create a shadow by duplicating the layer, and on the underside of the layer, pick a very dark green. I'm going to put on alpha lock on that layer, and then I'm going to press fill so that the dark color that we just selected fills that space. Next, I'm going to use Gaussian blur after I take off the alpha lock. That's important. Now I am moving the under shadow that I created. I'm taking down the opacity because I think it's too dark, and I'm putting on multiply. And if you zoom in, now you can see there is a shadow just underneath the avocados that we created. And I'm just using the smudge tool to lighten them up and, again, create texture, because one shadow on top of the bread would be a textured, imperfect shadow. But then two, just keeping consistent with the actual style that we're using. Now, I did duplicate the avocado layer so that way if I mess up, there's still the original. And now I'm painting on that duplicate and I'm adding in different color variations so that the avocados don't look identical. We want them to be independent of one another. And I'm just adding some light green into different parts of each avocado, again, creating more individuality between them. They are siblings. They are not twins, at least not identical ones. Maybe they're fraternal, but they do have differences. Once I have this established, I'm going to change the lighting as well because all of them have that same lighting that hits right there where there's that crater where the pit would be. So I'm just creating some highlights in slight variation and highlighting the certain parts of it where light would probably be hitting it a little bit harder, a little bit harsher. There we go. We're getting close to being done with the avocados. Next, I'm going to combine the avocado layers. I'm going to add a new layer, go to black, all the way down to spray paints, and I'm going to pick flicks. And then at a decent size, for your painting, you kind of have to decide what looks best. Then I'm going to do alpha lock. On the same brush, I'm going to choose a medium gray, and I'm just going to brush over the black so it starts to create color variation. And then lastly, white. So it looks like pepper. I feel like it looks pretty believable that way because pepper has a bunch of different colors in it. Technically, you could end the piece here. I, however, really wanted to add tomatoes. I saw a picture of a really elegant, beautiful avocado toast with tomatoes on it, and I was like, absolutely must. So I decided to paint that in as well. I use a pretty dark red, and I'm just sort of painting in boxes, essentially. I'm making cubed tomatoes, okay? Now, I will say by the end of this, they kind of look more like pomegranates. So, whatever you want it to be, whether it's the cubed tomatoes or it's the pomegranates, you get to decide. Once I have these all established and sort of laying about as hopefully organically as possible, I'm going to add a brighter red color and just add on a direction of light. So the lighter red is just going to go along the top. And then I will pick a slightly darker red, not as dark as the bottom, like establishing foundation of the tomato color, but just a little bit lighter, lighter. Then I'm going to use a really, really light pink, and I'm going to highlight the tops of the tomatoes. I make the ones right here much more highlighted because they are technically at the highest point and most exposed to light, and the others I use a little bit lighter and less obvious highlighting. And then I'm going to do what I did with the others, duplicate, alpha lock, go to a really nice dark color, black in this case, fill that layer, take off alpha lock. Then I'm going to use the select tool. I'm going to move them just slightly so we see the actual, I'm trying to figure out the direction that it needs to go so that it lines up with the direction of the shadow of the avocado. Next, I'm taking the opacity down, putting that shadow on multiply, make sure I'm on the shadowed layer, and then I'm going in with the smudge tool that's textured, and it's, I believe, one of the charcoal brushes again, and I just move I move the shadows around so it hopefully looks a little bit more natural. Then I take the layer with the pepper and move it up so that way it's on top of that tomato as well. And here's the finished product. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next tutorial. Bye!